A world where humanity has vanished. Humans are no longer humans but have become hungry monsters. The story begins at a military base where some children are imprisoned. Every day they are brought to class handcuffed. The soldiers treat them as if they were wild animals, keeping a distance from them, but these children looked absolutely innocent. One of them was Melanie, a tiny girl, but her mind was no less than that of a genius. The first to answer in every class, the most polite and the most different. Melanie was most attached to her teacher, Miss Justineau, who was like a mother to her. Every day their class was held. Their behavior was closely monitored, and all this was done under the supervision of Dr. Caroline. She was conducting some secret research on these children. There was something strange about them that made them eat insects, which they ate with great relish. Besides, Melanie, for some unknown reason, would count to 100,000 before going to sleep. The next morning while going to class, Melanie noticed that cell number 13 was locked. She asked the soldiers where Kenny was, but they wouldn't tell her anything. Melanie was terrified because any child who was absent would disappear again. During class, several children asked about Kenny, but Miss Justineau didn't say anything and asked the children to write a story. The children began writing. Meanwhile, outside the classroom, two soldiers, Teelan and Kieran, were watching them as usual. After a while, Justineau asked the children to read the story they had written aloud. Melanie immediately raised her hand and recited her story, which moved Justineau. Meanwhile, the guards, seeing Justineau caressing Melanie's head, created a commotion. The next moment, Sergeant Eddie arrived to take her class. He applied his spit to a child's wrist and made them smell it, revealing what the child she was developing an attachment to was really like. In a moment, they would bite and eat him. Upon smelling the spit, all the children in the class became aggressive, except Melanie. Melanie had the most self-control, but they were not normal people at all, and Sergeant Eddie kept reminding her of this. Melanie was completely disgusted by the way Justineau was treated. She threatened Sergeant Eddie, saying, "If I had a box filled with all the evil in the world, I would shove you inside and close the lid." This shows how deeply she loved Miss Justineau. Eddie replies, "I wish you never found that box, but eventually Melanie will find that box and lock Eddie inside. Just wait and see what happens next." Anyway, Sergeant Eddie punished her for this insolence. She was left strapped to a wheelchair and starved. A few hours later, Miss Justineau was returning from work in the office when she discovered what had happened. She called out to the guards, but they had all left. Finally, she opened the cell herself and went in to free Melanie. Melanie, meanwhile, was ravenously hungry, unable to control herself. She immediately warned Justineau to leave. Justineau sensed the situation and escaped just in time, meaning Melanie could only control herself until she was hungry. Soon the day came when Melanie was taken to the base's upper level. Millions of zombies were visible on the base's boundary, trying their best to get inside. Soldiers were constantly firing at them to stop them. In reality, a deadly fungal infection called cordyceps had spread throughout the world. They were all infected, a fungal virus that takes over human brains and turns them into zombies. The base's scientist, Dr. Caroline, was conducting research on these children. She believed that these children possessed a mixture of both virus and humanity, and that their brains might hold a cure for this disease. Meanwhile, as soon as Melanie saw Kenny's brain sealed in a jar in cell number 13, she knew she was next. However, Melanie remained completely calm and allowed what was happening to happen. Then Miss Justineau arrived to save her. She was ready to sacrifice her life for it. Then Dr. Caroline convinced her that she was very close to developing a vaccine and that it was possible to discuss it. Justineau agreed to the conversation, which proved to be her biggest mistake. She was tricked and captured. It was there that she was told that the children she had been assigned to teach were actually the main source of production for the vaccine test batch. She could no longer tamper with this. Justineau was sent to jail. Just then, the emergency siren sounded. Everyone was confused about whether to disturb her. Then they were attacked by zombies. The paramedic was bitten by one of the zombies. Dr. Caroline picked up a fire extinguisher and blew out the zombies' heads. She also hit some with sharp glass, leaving her own palm bleeding. Then the smell of blood sniffing. Their paramedic pounced on them. Caroline escaped. Melanie was still tied to the stretcher, but the zombies didn't attack her because she too had codicide in her brain. Meaning, zombies only attack humans who haven't yet been infected so they can infect them and spread the virus. Somehow, Melanie freed herself from the oven bed and escaped. There was chaos outside. The soldiers had completely failed to stop the zombies. In the chaos, Melanie spotted Miss Justineau, who was being beaten with the butts of her guns. Then Melanie attacked them like a slayer. She bit both soldiers and fell unconscious instantly. In fact, this often happened to her after eating something. After a few moments, Miss Justineau regained consciousness and carried her in her arms. But in the chaos, their survival seemed impossible. Zombie terror was spreading everywhere. Then, as if from an angel, Sergeant Eddie arrived. Unbeknownst to them, Justineau took Melanie and boarded the truck. After hours of travel, when they were free from the zombies, they stopped the truck in a deserted area. But as soon as they saw Melanie in the truck, Sergeant Eddie pointed his gun at her, aiming to kill her. Miss Justineau intervened and chased him away. She ran, but after walking a short distance, sat down in despair, unsure of what to do or where to go. Sergeant Eddie's group was in a similar situation. They couldn't find any radio frequency. They couldn't figure out where to go or which place was safe. In such a situation, Dr. Caroline still wanted to continue testing the vaccine. To do this, she needed to keep Melanie with her. Finally, they decided to head south to Bacane, but taking Melanie with them on the truck would be risky. So Dr. Caroline suggested removing the truck's spare wheel and carrying her on it. Upon hearing this, Justin Yu slapped her hard. He absolutely hated being dragged along on the wheel. Finally, Melanie was tied to a chair on top of the truck. During their journey, they reached a river. They were all thirsty, so they got down to drink water and replenish their supplies. While they were filling up, there was a sudden commotion. Dylan fired without delay. At the sound, hundreds of zombies rushed towards them. Everyone ran for their lives. Soldiers provided cover fire, allowing Miss Justin Yu and Dr. Caroline to reach the truck safely. Meanwhile, Dylan was caught by a zombie. He called for help from the sergeant. The sergeant shot the zombie. They then ran and got into the truck. But Dylan wasn't allowed inside because a wound was clearly visible on his hand. Dylan explained that he had been injured by a stone, but the next moment, he started turning into a zombie, so the sergeant shot him too. Seeing Melanie inside the truck from above, he became even more enraged. Miss Justine Yu then explained that her hands were tied behind her back and her face was masked. She couldn't bite anyone, nor would her saliva endanger anyone. But the real danger came when the truck wouldn't start. The fuel tank had been completely depleted due to a bullet hitting the fuel line. Now only one way out remained. They would be forced to abandon the forest route and travel to London on foot. Food and water would be abundant along this route, but the risks would be equally high. Soon they reached the outskirts of town. What they saw from there through binoculars terrified them. Hundreds of zombies stood still like statues. The surrounding shops had been looted long ago. They needed to find food to survive, but to do so, they would have to make their way through the zombies into the city. Perhaps they could find some groceries in a house. Before they left, the sergeant warned everyone, "Don't make any noise or the zombies might wake up at any moment." Everyone began moving forward stealthily, but the place was teeming with zombies. Amidst this silence, a female zombie was seen carrying her baby in a baby stroller. Despite repeated warnings, Dr. Caroline, driven by curiosity, went to check on the child. As soon as she removed the cloth from the baby, she screamed at the sight. Hearing the scream, some zombies woke up. They continued on, killing them. But what if the entire horde attacked them? To figure out a solution, they went to the top floor of the mall, where they could see the correct path. Leaving Melanie and Caroline in one place, Kiran, Justino, and Sergeant Eddie set out to scout in 3 directions. At one point, Justino heard someone growling. Meanwhile, Dr. Caroline was telling Melanie a story from her childhood. A few years ago, when the virus was spreading rapidly, Sergeant Eddie received several newborn babies from a maternity hospital who were clearly infected. Their umbilical cords were still attached to their mothers, but their mothers' organs had been completely destroyed. In fact, these babies were able to survive by feeding on their mother's organs through the umbilical cords. They lived inside the womb. They had even made their own way out. And the most surprising thing was that the children were still capable of thinking and understanding. In many cases, they behaved exactly like real humans. Melanie was one of those children. Meanwhile, following the sound, Justino arrived at a place where she discovered a zombie tied with an iron chain. Justino killed it and relieved it of its suffering. Gradually, Dr. Caroline explained the entire situation to Melanie. It was her compulsion to open the children's minds. She explained that she wanted to save Miss Justino and the entire world by creating a vaccine. Only then did Melanie realize that Dr. Caroline was right. By evening, Justino returned but could not arrange for Melanie's food. Keeping Melanie hungry could have been dangerous for her. Meanwhile, Kiran found some food and alcohol in a refrigerator, which helped them survive the night. Their problems worsened in the morning. Yesterday's commotion had brought even more zombies out. Waiting around wouldn't change anything. Kiran then suggested using a cat or dog to distract them. But where would a cat come from? This was a major problem. Melanie said, "I can do that." But Dr. Caroline refused, because Melanie knew she would be killed and her brain extracted to make a vaccine. In such a situation, there was no guarantee she would return. Melanie explained that even making a vaccine would be pointless. This world was over. No matter what, she wanted to be with Miss Justino, and that was why she would return. Trusting her, she was allowed to go. Soon she found a cat, but seeing him, she couldn't control herself. Instead of bringing him, she ate him. Anyway, Inside a house, she found a dog. She brought it and left it among the zombies. The dog ran and all the zombies followed. Now the path was clear. Handcuffing Melanie, they set off again on their journey to Baiken, but after going some distance, they had to stop again. She took her radio with her and searched for a route where there were hardly any zombies. They took that route. It turned out that there were many dead zombies lying on that route, but the brain's cordyceps were drawing nourishment from the tree trunks to protect themselves. And most alarmingly, the tree trunks had grown fruit. One tall building was even full of such fruit. Perhaps these were the very fruits that harbored the bacteria that spread the infection. As far as Dr. Caroline understood, this was the second stage of the infection. This meant the virus had now become even more dangerous in its next form. If these fruits burst, their seeds would spread into the air, and then people would become infected simply by breathing, meaning the end of the world was very near. Later they found an advanced truck. Dr. Caroline had worked there a few years earlier, so she knew everything about this truck. The solar system, etc., was still in place and working, but the truck wouldn't start. Sergeant Eddie tried to contact Beacon Base via radio, but there was no response, meaning they had no other option but to repair the truck. But first, they needed food, and Kiran went in search of it. Melanie was also desperate with hunger, and there was no way she would lose her temper. Finally, Sergeant Eddie allowed her to go. She ran off, hunted a pigeon, and ate it. Meanwhile, Kiran went into a house, checked the refrigerator but found nothing. When she came out, a strange girl saw her. By then, Sergeant Eddie and Justino had fixed the truck's engine. They were just waiting for everyone to return so they could leave together. Meanwhile, Melanie arrived at a place where there were many children like her. They couldn't speak a single word properly. They had created their own language. Then the girl who had seen Kiran arrived and told everyone. Then what happened? They all set out to hunt Kiran. Meanwhile, the wound on Dr. Caroline's palm had become serious. The blood poisoning from the cut was slowly spreading through her body. She was certain she wouldn't live long. But before she died, she wanted to create a vaccine, which required Melanie's brain and spinal cord. Just then, Melanie returned. She explained that there were other children like her who had probably seen Kiran and were about to kill him. Meanwhile, Kiran was wandering around looking for food when he found some boxes lying on the ground. Picking up the boxes, he reached a shop, but getting inside wasn't easy. He quickly removed his armor and weapons and managed to get inside. Meanwhile, Sergeant Eddie tried to contact Kiran on the radio, but Kiran had left his radio outside. When he didn't get a response, Eddie was about to go to his rescue when the radio rang. A message was coming from Baiken Base. Eddie explained his situation. We were in London. They are a day's journey north of Baiken across the river. Then word came from Baiken that their defense system had been completely destroyed. It was only a matter of hours. Zombies were about to break into the base. This meant that the last remaining safe haven was about to collapse. Meanwhile, Melanie was insistent on going to rescue Kiran. At that very moment, Justino and Eddie set out with weapons. Meanwhile, Kiran had found a treasure. There was enough food to last for years. Suddenly, a girl appeared before him, holding a rat. Kiran was terrified. He had no idea that this was all a trap. Lured by the girl, he started toward her. Just then, two children bit him on both sides, on his knees. Wounded, he fell. Those ferocious children surrounded him from all sides, above, below, in front, behind. Kiran pulled out a grenade and threatened to pull the pin. But those children had no understanding of this. Ultimately, he gave his life but deliberately did not pull the pin. When his companions arrived to rescue him some time later, it was too late. They soon realized that a trap had been laid to trap Kiran, and now they themselves were trapped in the same trap, one trap on top of another. The children were waiting outside the shop for him to come out. Eddie wanted to finish him off right there, but Melanie stopped him. She herself stepped forward to teach them a lesson. She confronted their leader, cleverly handcuffed him, and beat him to death with his own stick. With the leader dead, the other children's courage broke. None of them could stand up to him. Thus, they managed to escape without killing anyone else. When they returned to the truck, they found the door open. They hurried inside and discovered that Dr. Caroline had sprayed O2 gas inside. Within moments, all three fell unconscious. Caroline then released the gas and began the process of removing Melanie's brain. But before that could happen, Melanie regained consciousness and warned, "If you try to kill me, I'll bite you." She also revealed that she hadn't actually fainted. In fact, she could hold her breath until she counted to 1,000, and she practiced this every night before going to sleep at the base. The doctor suspected that the fungus in her brain was capable of storing oxygen. Finally, Dr. Caroline tried to persuade Melanie by citing Justino's life. She said that if a flood or fire broke out one day, all these fruits would burst, and Justino would also become a zombie. He explained that only Melanie could save her and the entire world. For a moment, Melanie was swayed. But then she asked a question. All she wanted to know was whether her classmates were alive before leaving the base. When the doctor answered yes, Melanie said, "So what did you do to save them? Now we'll give our lives. Stay here or you'll be killed." But Caroline wasn't going to give up. She ran after Melanie and ended up trapped in the clutches of those ravenous children, ultimately losing her life. Meanwhile, Melanie reached the tall building laden with cordyceps fruits. She set it on fire, causing all the fruits to explode. Within moments, the spores engulfed the entire atmosphere. Melanie understood that humans would continue to harvest them in the name of making a vaccine, so she decided to destroy humanity itself. Just then, she met Sergeant Eddie, who had gone looking for her. Melanie was surprised to see him outside, as she had thought Eddie would be inside the truck, which was airtight. The filter prevented the spores from entering, allowing them to survive. But alas, that wasn't to be. Eddie was also infected and died. Miss Justineau was inside the truck, so she was the only one who survived. Now she teaches street children every day because they are the future of this world, able to survive in this environment. So friends, that was the story of the girl with all the gifts. I hope you enjoyed it.